He had lost everything, but he refused to give up. Through years of hard work, sacrifice, and an unbreakable spirit, he built himself back up. And when he returned, everything had changed, but what happened next will shock you. Stay till the end. It was a cold evening when David, a hard-working tenant, stood at the door of his small apartment. His landlord, Mr. Harris, a wealthy and arrogant man, loomed over him with a notice in hand. "You're late on rent again, David," Mr. Harris said with a smirk. "I can't have unreliable tenants. You have to leave right now." David's heart sank. He had never missed a payment before, but a recent job loss had put him in a tight spot. "Please, Mr. Harris, I just need a little time. I'll get back on my feet." But Mr. Harris laughed coldly. "Not my problem. Pack your bags." With no other choice, David gathered his few belongings and left. The night air was freezing, but his determination was burning hot. He wouldn't let this defeat him. David managed to find a small rental in a different part of town. It wasn't much, but it was his new beginning. Determined to turn his life around, he took on multiple jobs, working late nights and early mornings. He studied business whenever he had a free moment, dreaming of the day he wouldn't have to depend on a landlord. His hard work paid off. Within a few years, David saved enough to start a real estate business. He began buying properties, renovating them, and turning them into thriving investments. One day, standing in front of a tall skyscraper, now bearing his name, David couldn't believe how far he had come. He was no longer just a tenant. He was an owner. Meanwhile, Mr. Harris's fortune declined. He had neglected his properties, spending his wealth recklessly. Then the unthinkable happened. A massive flood swept through the city, destroying homes, businesses, and displacing thousands. Mr. Harris's own house was among them. With nowhere to go, he found himself homeless. He wandered the streets, hungry, tired, and full of regret. He never thought he'd be the one begging for help. One day, Mr. Harris stumbled into a shelter. He looked around at the long line of displaced families, feeling utterly hopeless. Then a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Harris?" David stood before him. Harris's face burned with shame. He looked at the man he had once thrown out on the streets. "David, I didn't know. I lost everything." David took a deep breath. The old him would have walked away, but he had learned kindness and resilience. "Come with me," David said. David took Mr. Harris to one of his apartment buildings and handed him a key. "This is for you, rent-free until you get back on your feet." Mr. Harris's eyes filled with tears. "After everything I did to you, why would you help me?" David smiled. "Because I know what it feels like to have nothing, and because I won't let the past define who I am." Mr. Harris nodded in gratitude, realizing that true wealth is kindness. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's spread kindness and inspire others to always rise above hate.